So React Hook Form helps us to build performant, flexible and extensible forms with easy to use validations in React.js. And it is super easy to work with as well. That is why a lot of companies are choosing it to build their forms in their apps. So I've opened VS Code over here and let's go on and set up a new React with TypeScript app. So I'll say npm create wheat at latest. And it's gonna ask us the project name. I'm just gonna press dot so that it creates the project over here. Press enter. I'm gonna select React and TypeScript. There we go. A new React TypeScript app has been initialized. Let's go on and delete the things that we don't need, like this assets folder, everything inside of index.css, everything inside of app.css, and inside of app.tsx. I'm gonna remove all of these things and have a div, which is going to say, subscribe to Roadside Coder, which you should if you haven't yet. So let's just remove all of these states and all these imports. And now I'm gonna run npm install so that it's gonna install all of the dependencies that are inside of this package.json file. Hello. All right, there we go. Let's close this and I'll try to run by doing npm run dev. And you can see our app is successfully running just like this. Subscribe to Roadside Coder. Great. So before understanding how React Hook Form helps us, let's first understand the traditional way of creating the forms in React.js. So I've created a component over here called simple form. And if you go inside of it, we can see we have created a form over here. So let me just show you. That looks something like this. It's a fairly complex form, right? With all of the types of field that we generally use. First name, last name, email, age, a select drop down. We have a hobby name as well, which is kind of an array. If we, let's say, add hobby, like gaming, and we can add a new hobby over here as well. We can remove any of the previous hobbies, right? Something like this. We also have a checkbox over here. When we click on it, you can see we have a optional input, which is gonna ask us, how did you hear about us when we go to subscribe to their newsletter, right? So yeah, I've covered all of the use cases that we generally encounter while creating forms in React.js, including this date as well. So let's go and have a look at the code. So first of all, simply we have a use state over here, right? For inside of which where we are going to be storing all of our state. And you can see I've used this form data type, the interface of form data. Let me just show you. First, we have this address. We have a hobby, which is going to be an array of hobbies, right? The array type is going to be containing city and state. We have first name, last name, string. All of these are going to be string. Age is going to be number, gender string. Start date is going to be obviously of the date type. Subscribe is going to be Boolean and referral is going to be string, right? Okay. So we have applied this type so that, you can understand perfectly how you can use this library in JavaScript as well as in TypeScript as well. Okay, so we have use state over here, and then after that we have created two states. First one for handling the error and second one for handling the loading. And you'll see when I go on to cover React Hook Form, all of these things come right out of the box in React Hook Form. Right, so okay, cool. So first of all, let's go on and have a look at the JSX. So we have this form over here with the onSubmit tag, inside of which we have different input fields. First of all, for name, inside of which we have the onChange, and inside of the handle change. For each and every field, it's going to be setting our form data just like we normally do by taking it out of the e.target. Right, cool. So we have first name, last name, email, age. For gender, we have a select JSX tag with the options inside of it. For the address, we have the city and the state. And I would highly recommend you guys to just click the link in the description down below and open this code alongside me so that you can also see the code that I'm going through right now. Then after that, we have this start date tag. It's just a date picker component which you can install by doing React date picker, right? The hobbies array, which is rendering all of the hobbies from this form data, and we are handling it separately. So you can see when we enter some hobby, we have this handle hobby change, which updates the state inside of this. And then when we want to add this, we are going to be clicking on this add hobby, and it's going to be adding the hobby inside of this array, right? Then we have subscribe to newsletter checkbox. And if it's clicked, that is if subscribe is true, we're going to show the referral source, right? So this is a very simple form. When we click on submit, it's gonna trigger this onSubmit function. And inside of this, simply we have added these validations over here as well. And you can see this looks like an absolute mess. We're checking for first name, last name, if it exists or not. For email, we're checking using regex. For age, we have added some validation, genders, address, city, and this is kind of an headache. It would be much better if we could get something, which involves much less code, but adding validations conveniently like we do in libraries like Yup or Zod, which we are also going to be covering in this video. And after the validations, you can see we are triggering a dummy API call over here, simulated API, which creates a little bit of delay of 2 seconds, and it can sometimes reject the form or resolve the form. So if I go back and see, if I click on submit over here, you can see we have not filled it right now. So it's going to show us all of these errors. But if I quickly go on and fill it, and one thing you can see, whenever I'm going on and filling these fields, it's not adding the validations in real time. So I'll show you that as well in this video. So if I just quickly fill it. So there we go. If I click on submit now, you're going to see we get successful, this data object that it has successfully submitted. Great. So let's go on and see how we can go on and implement React hook form inside of it. So first of all, let's go on and install React hook form, right? So I'll just open a new terminal and let's go to the website and see how we can install it. Let's click on get started and npm install React hook form. Okay, let's copy it and paste it over here. What I'll do, I'll remove everything before JSX, all of these things from over here. Let's remove all of this mess. Now you can already see so much code has been removed from this. So let's just remove this use state because we are not going to be needing use state hook at all now. Everything will be handled by the library. First thing, and the most crucial thing that we're going to be needing is a hook called useForm. And this is going to be imported from React hook form. And this useForm right here is going to be taking all of the values that we gave by default into that use state. So you know what we can do? We can let's just create a separate file for this. So here we go. I've created a separate file called hook form so that you guys can have, convenience accessing all of both of these, the old code and the new code as well, right? So, okay. So now inside this useForm hook, it has something called as default values key, which will take all the default values just like we provided over here in the use state. So let's just take this object and provide it to this. And this is also going to be taking the types. So form data, just like previously. But this will return us a lot of things over here. And one of the most important thing is called register. And this will single-handedly handle everything inside of our form. Let me show you. So if I just copy this register and go down, first of all, let me just comment this on submit out for now. And over here in the input. So we have this first name, last name, all of these inputs, right? So I'll remove everything over here and I'll just have curly braces and I'll say ... register and I'll tell it what is this field. So you can see since we're using TypeScript, it gave us all of these suggestions over here. So we are using first name, right? So first thing that it will be taking is the key name. So first name. And then after this, we can add the validations to it. Like for example, required. It's required. So I'll say if this doesn't fulfills, if the user does not provide this, it will give this error. So I'll just say first name is required. And we're going to have to render all of these errors as well. Earlier we were handling it through a separate state, but now notice how we're going to be handling it. Apart from register, we get something else over here, which is called form state. And this form state contains multiple different things. If I press Control space, you can see a lot of things over here. Is loading, is submitted, is submitting, right? But what we need is this errors object, comma. I'm also going to be needing is submitting because we earlier, if you remember, we named it as is submitting, right? So now it's going to be working right away. So let's see, let's notice. So see error.firstname, and since we have already named this as first name over here, it's going to pick it up and render it right here. And one more change that we have to do over here is just add .message. That's all. Same with the last name as well. So I'll remove all of this, just render the last name required. Last name is required. I'll say .message. Now, in case of our email, we need to have the validations to check if it's an email or not, right? So we will do something like this. First of all, obviously register and email. And in the second object, first of all, we will say required. Yep, that is required. And then we will give this regex pattern over here with the value. And if it's not valid, we're going to throw this error message, invalid email address. And I'll say .message over here as well. Okay, let's move forward to the number types or the age over here. So I'll just remove this. Let me just, let's just copy this and paste it over here. This will be age and required. So age is required. And instead of this pattern now, when it comes to age, we have added the validation that user should be more than 18 years of age, right? So we can add multiple different validations, as I already showed you: maximum, minimum, max length, and bunch of different validations. You can definitely go on over here and explore this. So I'll add a minimum validation. So the minimum age should be value to be 18. And if it's not fulfilled, we can give a message over here like this. And we can add dot message here as well. Now, when it comes to the select type of form field, how do we handle this? It is going to be exactly the same. Just remove all of this. We're going to say register, gender, and required gender is required, and dot message. So you see, it saves us so much time and so much code to be written. And this register function works like a magic and handles everything out of the box. Let's go down. And now I'll show you something different over here for the address. So what I want to do over here is I want to enter my city, and only when I have entered my city, I want to enter my state over here, right? Before that, I don't want to show user this field over here. Okay, so let me just remove all of this. Let's just keep placeholder in this case. And I'll just say register address dot city, because if you see, we have address and we have city and state separately, right? So right now we're handling city, so address dot city, and required city is required. Okay, but when it comes to state, notice how it handles it. So if I just write it like this, and address dot state, and I'll say state is required dot message. It's gonna only show this state field when this city is entered, and I'll show you in just a moment. Let me just write out the others as well. Let's check for this date picker. Now this works a little bit differently because we are using third-party library over here, right? And a lot of third-party libraries, we don't know how they will behave with certain things. So inside of this React hook form, we have something called as controller, or we can also use controller hook in place of this as well. Let me show you. Let me just go back to the documentation. If I click on API, you can see we have this use controller hook. Either we can use this, or which is much more convenient, is this controller right over here. Let's see how this works. So let's say, yeah, they've given the date picker example over here. See, we have added this controller, and it takes this control from this use form. And what is this control over here? So this control, as the name suggests, provides us the control of the form, right? We can manipulate our form by using this field over here, or using this variable, right? So that is what it takes over here. And then the name of that field. And then inside the render, it takes a callback inside of it, which we render this React date picker component, and it takes something like on change, on blur, value ref. So let me just do one thing. Let me just copy this up. Let's go back to the code and replace it with this. Let's import it from React hook form, and I'll take this control from this over here. Okay. Now after this, the name should be date or start date, and we're not going to be needing all of these things. Let's just take the field for now, and I'll just remove all of this. And inside the date picker, I'll say selected to be field dot value, and I can give placeholder over here, and if I want, I can give on change, and you've already seen on change comes from inside of this field. So I'll supply the date to it whenever we change the date, which is going to be of type date, and I'll just apply it to this on change function over here, and this will handle everything through this controller over here. So make sure to use this controller when dealing with third-party libraries inside of React hook form. So now we're here in the hobbies, which is going to be an array type, right? So when we enter values inside of the hobbies, we have to handle it as an array, right? So how do we use React hook form to handle it? So we will use a hook called useFieldArray. So if I go back to the docs and go to API, we can see we have this useFieldArray over here. And this is a custom hook for working with field arrays in a dynamic form. The motivation is to provide better user experience and performance. So it basically takes the control, just like previously, and the name of that particular field. And then it provides us with something called as fields, so that we can render it just like earlier we were using field data, right? And inside of it, we can use the index to reference to that particular value that we're trying to change. Let me show you. So I'll go up over here. I'll take the useFieldArray hook. This will take the control and the name. So name, I'll say hobbies. and it automatically detected it because this is the only field which is an array, right? So again, benefits of using TypeScript. So const, and we will take out the fields. One thing that we will take out as well is the append, so that we can append new values and we can remove values from this. Okay, so now right here, instead of this form data, I'll use the fields that we've got. And instead of hobbies, I'll just say fields.map. Hobby, we'll take the hobby and the index. Okay, that's fine. Instead of all of this, I'll say ... register, just like previously. And we will provide the hobbies dot whatever the name of the index is, right? So I'll say index, let's just make it use backticks over here, and we will render the name from inside of it and the validation as well. So I'll say required. If it's not provided, hobby name is required, and we're gonna handle the errors right here dot message. And see, most of the things remain the same. And now over here, let's add the functionality of appending and removing, right? So again, we will use fields. If fields dot length is more than 1, then we will show this. And set this remove hobbies, we will just use this remove function that we've got from there. And same to this, add hobby as well. So instead of this, I'll say append, and we will append the name, whatever the name is, right? So when we click on this add hobby, it's gonna insert a empty hobby field over here, right? So that's what I'll do, and then user can enter their hobby and change it through this register function. Also, this hobby can be used over here as a key. So hobby ID, that's more like it. Now, next we have our checkbox, subscribe to newsletter. Again, it's going to be very similar. I'll remove all of these things over here and I'll just say register, subscribe, and just keep this checkbox over here because so that it knows that it is a checkbox input. Okay, after that, if the subscribe is there, so instead of using this, we have another function over here called getValues. So from this useForm, I'll take getValues, and we will use this to take out a particular value from inside of our form. So I'll say getValue, and inside the bracket, I'll say subscribe, right? And we're going to check. If it's true, then we're going to display this. Inside the referral source, simply, I'll just say register, referral, and the error if it's, it's not provided. I'll just say dot message over here. And you can see I've added this separate error over here for errors.root, and this root error is for our server-side errors whenever our API fails, right? So how do we handle this? Before checking this, let me just show you something else. Let me just add root.message over here first. We're going to add our onSubmit. So onSubmit right here. Let me just uncomment it out. And right above this, let's just create a function const onSubmit, submit handler. And this will come from React hook form, obviously. And it will also take the form data, the type of form that we're trying to submit, right? So form data that we've already provided. This will be an asynchronous form since we'll be making an API call, and we will take some data over here, which will be provided through this onSubmit form. So let me just provide this onSubmit over here. And actually, instead of writing this onSubmit directly, we have to write something called as handleSubmit. And this handleSubmit function comes from this useForm hook. And then inside of this parenthesis, we have to provide that onSubmit function so that this handles this onSubmit function over here, right? So inside of this function, all we have to do is we have to make that API call that we made earlier. So let me just bring in that code. So we have the response of that simulated API. We're providing the data, and if we get the success, we get the response. And if we get some error, we're gonna set the error, and we're gonna set the error of root that I showed you earlier, right? So this root right over here is what we will render at the bottom of our form, which will be for our server-side errors. And this set error will also be taken from this use form, so that we don't have to create a separate, state for it. So if I remove this root, you can see we have multiple different options over here. We can manipulate any single error inside of this form, right? But if we choose root, this will be for the whole of the form, or generally which we use for server-side errors, right? And we have appended this message over here. Okay, and I think this should work. And you can see we have used that on submitting over here inside of our button to show the loading. Okay, let's go on and check it out. Let's just add this hook form usage over here. Okay, let's click on submit. You can see we have this validation, but as soon as I start typing, you can see it's validating in real time. So if I add all of these things, see, and yeah, now you can see we just have the city over here, right? So if I just add the city, now you can see we get the state. So I'll add the state over here, right? So it is doing that conditional rendering. Only when this city is added, then the state field will be shown, and it is handled by it internally. We have not done anything. Let's add the start date. Let's add some hobby. Okay, let's click on submit now, and you're gonna see, okay, right now we got that error because we have a 50-50 chance of getting error with this API. Let's click on submit again. Okay, there we go. We get our form submitted. If I click on subscribe to newsletter, we will get this referral source. We can add whatever we want over here. Click on submit, and you can see we get this referral source and everything inside of it. So yeah, this is how you use React hook forms to efficiently and easily handle forms in React.js, all of these types of field. Now let's go on and see how we can make our validations much more efficient. So right now you can see for each and every field we have to add this, required, and they add that regex over here, and like this is a headache, right? Minimum value to be 18. This further increases our code. What we can do, we can use a library like yup or Zod over here as well, right? Or you can also use a technique called as config driven form. You can create a configuration for a form, and then you can render the complete form over here. That is much more efficient. And I've covered this technique in my front-end interview preparation course. This is the only thing that you will ever need to prepare for your front-end interviews. And not only this, I've covered every single topic of React.js, like React Router DOM, Redux, all of the hooks, class-based component, function-based component React, even the performance optimization, which is asked from senior developers a lot, tons of machine coding questions as well, and obviously in-depth interview preparation course on JavaScript as well. So all of this you get in one single course. So click the link in the description down below, because right now we're having the biggest sale of the year for a very limited time. So don't forget to check it out. Or you can also scan this QR code on your screen to go directly to the course page. So anyways, let's go on and see how we can add the validations more efficiently. Let me just remove all of these validations from over here. From here as well. Alright, so I've removed all of the validations now. And we can either use something like yup or Zod. And since Zod is very trending nowadays, let's go on and use that. So what I'll do, I'll go to my terminal, create a new terminal over here. I'll say npm install Zod. And we're going to be needing one more thing to make Zod work with hook form or React hook form. So in the docs, if you go to get started and click on schema validation, you can see we support schema based validation form with yup, Zod, superstruct, etc. And to do this, we use @hook form /resolver. So let's just copy it and paste it right over here. And this provides us with all of the resolvers that will be helping us to, adding the validations. So, okay, Zod and the resolvers have been installed. So now I'll import them over here. So import Z from Zod. And then I'll import Zod Resolver from @hook form /resolver /Zod. Now, if you remember, I've created a video on yup validation, and Zod is kind of very similar to yup as well. So what we have to do, we have to first create a schema which will help us in validating all of these fields, right? And we have to write all of the rules of our validations inside of that schema. So I'll say const form schema, and actually we can, get rid of this form data type now. We're gonna be creating it using our form schema. So form schema equals z.object. And inside this, it takes another object and it will take all the fields. So let's say, for example, first name, and we can add the validations for this. We can say z.string. We have provided the type of this thing, and then we're gonna say min, that is the minimum length has to be 1. And if it's not provided, we're gonna give the error, that is first name is required. We can add it similar for our last name and email as well. And you can see in the email, we have this email field out of the box, which will, just check if it's an email or not. We don't have to do any regex or anything. Let's see for the age. We're going to say that this is a number and minimum value has to be 18, else it will give this error. For the select type, which in this case is gender, we're going to use the enum. So I'll say z.enum, and enum is provided to check amongst the certain values, right? So we have 3 values over here. First, male, then female, and other. And if this is not satisfied, I'm gonna give an object with the message that gender is required. After that, we have the address. And if you remember, address was an object, right? So I'll say z.object of an object type. And inside this object, we have two more things. We have a city and a state. So I'll say city to be a string and state to be a string as well. And just like previously, we're going to provide the errors if it's not provided. For our hobbies, I'm going to say z.array because it's an array type. Inside this array, we have an object of name, right? So I'll say z.object name, and name will be a string. And again, it will be required. And we will be needing at least one hobby to be provided over here, right? So I'll say .min. We will chain it. We will say 1 so that user at least provides one hobby, and we can give the error over here. Then for our start date, it's very simple, z.date. For our checkbox, I'll say z.boolean. And for referral, I'll say z.string.default. Great. So this is how you're going to go on and create your schema using Zod. Now let's see how we can use this schema. First of all, let's just go on and create the type, right? Because this will start giving us error because this form data is not present. So I'll say type form data. I'll say z.infer, and I'll provide the type of the schema that we've created. So form schema, whatever the type of this form schema is, just take it inside of this form data as well. And now you can see we won't get any error over here. For the gender, I guess let's just provide this undefined by default. And now you'll see we're using this useForm over here, right? We've installed this Zod Resolver or hook form resolver. So now what we can do, apart from this default value, we can provide it second thing called as resolver. And it will take the Zod Resolver and take the form schema right over here. And yeah, I think this should be it. Let's just go on and see if our form works or not. So let's just rename this component hook form usage to hook form with Zod. And if you guys want me to create a complete video on Zod, just let me know in the comments down below. I'll bring in more in-depth video on this. So let's just import this. Let's see. Let's refresh our app. Okay, everything seems to be working fine. If I click on submit, all right. If I say Piyush, add the name, email, age, gender, and you can see this thing still manages to work. Okay, let's click on submit. And what is this? Expected number received string. Let's see, maybe we have to change something. Actually, we need to add something called value as number over here, and I'll give it true. So now this should work fine. If I click on submit, yeah, this is working fine. Gender, I have selected it. What's wrong in this? I think it's because of the values that we have provided. This M for the male is small, and this for the Zod, it's bigger. So I'll say just M, F small, and for other, we can keep small. And now I think this should work. Let's just change the value. Yep, now it's working. If I click on submit now, server error, okay. Let's try again. There we go. We get the success. So yeah, this is how the React hook form works, and this is how you can add an external validations library like Yup or Zod to add the validations inside of it much more efficiently. And if you like this video, give this video a huge fat thumbs up, and definitely check out my front-end interview preparation course if you're preparing for your interviews from the link in the description down below.